I'm one, let me be many. I'm one, let me be many. So that myth of Prajapati is a very important one, in fact, in a Vedic lore. Why? It will become clearer now. The doctrine of Spanda is known for its emphasis on this, what we just spoke about, as this expansion and contraction. Expansion and contraction. Just as in the many symbologies, many symbolic kind of, just like as it is in the Tao Te Ching or many other spiritual traditions, that one quality contains its opposite in its essence. So in other words, amidst of expansion, a contraction already present there. Likewise, amidst of contraction, expansion is already present there. Just like in that symbol, right? Yin and yang, the droplet of the opposite color contained in each of that what otherwise is in constant motion. So nothing, as it were, is just that. There's no such thing as just expansion or just contraction. This is a very, very helpful understanding. It doesn't matter how contracted we may feel, in the very, very heart of that contraction, there is an expansion, and vice versa. And that is reflected, or rather a reflection of that cosmological picture, that cosmological view of the way the Spanda is expressed through the 5 wheels of energy. 5 wheels of energy. So these 5 wheels of energy will give it first this view. So the 5 wheels of energy will be, let's say, exemplified first by the wheel of Vameshvari. The wheel of Vameshvari. Then the wheel of Kekari. Then the wheel of Gokari. And the wheel, so how many we have? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that will be 5, right? So this will enumerate them now, but so this pulsating, remember yesterday we did this, right? Right? So it's a kind of giving it another perspective. So these wheels of energy, wheels of Shakti, how the Shakti expands, because that is required. Awareness cannot expand unless it is carried by the power of its soul, of its own self-awareness. So if some of you have come across the tantric philosophy, you may have these 2 principal, let's say, categories that Tantra begins with. The principle that stands for awareness itself as the principle of light, prakasha, and the principle of being able to have that light falling back onto itself, that reflective power of its own awareness, which is vimarsha. So awareness always accompanied by the power of its own reflection, self-awareness. Awareness here is exemplified by that in Sanskrit, Shiva as Prakasha. And that power of self-awareness is the power of Shakti, Vimarsha. So here, we're simply taking it further. The very first wheel of energy, the very first wheel of Shakti is the wheel of Vamishvari. Excuse me. This is where all the limitations of which we spoke yesterday are coming into place. So, at the wheel of Vamishvari, which encompasses all these are, right? We can kind of imagine this kind of propensity, right? All this would be further expansion as the further waves. As you throw a pebble into the still water, whatever, pond, pool, there will be like first central kind of, and then all these waves will proceed from there. Imagine it that way. So it's not just like these wheels and they're just like staying there. This is constantly in motion. So it's, in other words, that spanda, that throb, at the epicenter of it all, and the waves go out. And they go out until they reach the furthermost degree of expansion, and the opposite movement begins. So it begins to return to where it all came from. Just as I said, if you do that, and you're attentive enough, you can do that in a bowl, and you can see that exactly what's happening there. Slow motion. Drop of water or oil. Waves go out, touch the periphery of the bowl, and they go back. Simple. And of course, that creates myriad of ripples. We'll talk about that, because this is what makes it into this complete and utter seamless experience. So the first wheel, the wheel of Vamishvari, is where the first limitations, all 5 kanchukas, all 5 limitations that we yesterday spoke, remember when we talk about Shiva to individual, right? Individual of the world. Shiva, Nara, or we can use another word if you want. Okay? Nara, for now. Not Shiva. So this wheel of Vamishvari is where the consciousness, where awareness causes upon itself all the imposition, where all that, what otherwise is, let's say, this dot might be helpful to represent as the absolute. All the limitations are laid in place here at the wheel of Vamishvari. All the limitations. So already awareness limited itself. And in previous discourses and immersions, we spoke about the analogy of this, if some of you have come across, of Vedic myth known as creational myth. If any of you have come across this, maybe reading something more emphatically, or just it was mentioned, the myth of Prajapati. Prajapati is a primordial being, and it's a Vedic myth, and part of the Vedic lore. So Prajapati is this primordial being of oneness. There is no diversity, no multiplicity. It's oneness only, and oneness prevails. Yet something within the Prajapati swells. In the Rig Vedas, it's expressed very simply through the suktas, I'm one, let me be many. I am one, let me be many. So that myth of Prajapati is a very important one, in fact, in a Vedic lore. Why? It will become clearer now. Prajapati swelled with this desire to know himself. And he cannot know himself. It's a compact mass of awareness, or compact mass. There's only Prajapati, homogeneous throughout. There's no difference, no differentiation, nothing, no multiplicity, no diversity. You see? So Vedic lore speaks about it in terms of being swelled to such degree with this desire to know what he actually is. He decides to commit an act of self-sacrifice. It's the very first sacrifice ever on a cosmic proportion. He dismembers himself with the power of his own, of course, that is available. In other words, he breaks himself, shreds himself to pieces. There are hymns in that creational myth of what it causes to Prajapati, what it actually causes for that oneness to dismember itself, and through the act of that, even that language is used, vicious sacrifice. Prajapati gives rise to diversity, multiplicity. Now, unity is lost. Now, oneness is lost. But instead, there is diversity, there is multiplicity, there is variety, there is way to compare, to know, to experience. And yet, the echo of that self-sacrifice fills in the entire creation. The very frequencies of that self-sacrifice are reverberating at the, let's say, subatomic level. So this act of willing self-sacrifice, because that was exactly what Prajapati wanted, is now haunting the entire creation, all its parts having that faint, somewhere unacknowledged memory of its original wholeness, because every part carries that. Every part carries that. And that is the very, very birth of the meaning of yagya. If any of you to have a crash course in things Indian, everything Indian, yagya is perhaps the most important concept. Yagya simply means a sacrificial offering, a sacrifice, an offering. Yagya. Any one of you who have read the Bhagavad Gita, you remember how many verses dedicated to various yagyas, various forms of offerings. So this myth of Prajapati speaks to, or rather gives that background of the importance of the sacrifice. Just as Mahatma Gandhi is known, quoting to what he said, there is no religion without sacrifice. This is a very Indian thing to say. There's no religion without sacrifice. Why? Well, that is why. Because the very concept of yagya, or sacrificial offering, is rooted in the understanding that the entire creation is haunted unless that original act of self-sacrifice is restored through these sacrifices that performed now consciously on a level of this, let's say, separate parts that seeking to become whole again. So this is the concept of yagya. You see? I speak about it because it's very important to distinguish this very, forgive me, selfish often, very driven by whatever personal motivations that the West has been taken over in the past, let's say, several decades, maybe 150 years, maybe longer, that desire for emancipation, for self-realization, in the way it looks today. And so many Indian teachings have been incorporated, converted, and brought from the Orient into the Occident, and rerouted and given variety of perspectives. But in India itself, nobody meditates, nobody performs offering without understanding what if they're doing it really properly. Of course, you can go to the temple and commission a yagya, where the priests, because it is their job, will perform that yagya on your behalf, for your success, for your career, for your spouse, for your children, for your health, for your this, for your business. They will do that. There is a whole prescription. The leaflet will be given to you. You choose your yagya, tick the boxes, and the recitation will be given an appointed day, and you will receive the recording. All these oblations will be performed. All the substances will be offered into the fire. Or the yagya can be done in the way of just recitation. But the point is, what we are making here is that this myth of Prajapati is to illustrate a one-on-one analogy of what's taking place here as well. The myth of Prajapati, the birth, which gives birth to the importance of sacrificial offering, because it is through the sacrificial offering the original unity that is lost is being returned. You see? So it, as it were, the price. See, this is maybe, let's give it another shot at it, another take. The price of that dismembering that Prajapati undergoes, heavily laid on the entire creation, because the entire creation was the very, very original cause of that dismembering. So the creation itself is always incomplete because it's an outcome of the dismembering. You can't have both. You can't have. Prajapati couldn't remain intact as a totality, unity, wholeness, oneness, and there is the world. That's why I always say you cannot have your cake and eat it too. See? So something goes through sacrifice here. And the Prajapati's myth clearly speaks in a language which is available to common folk to understand. So the analogy is given, it's very visceral, very bloody even in a way of how it speaks about what it causes. It gives rise to this world of multiplicity and diversity. But this world is there and then always incomplete. And not only that, it's incomplete in as far as there is a return is being made to reproduce, replicate that original sacrifice that Prajapati undergo by virtue of offering something of oneself. You see? So only through the act of offering, that act can be appeased to whatever degree or what have you. So the Bhagavad Gita verses, for example, when it speaks and enumerates all various yagyas, and it goes, some perform it through the means of material possessions. Others perform it through sustaining from the substances and offering, let's say, breath into breath. Others perform it through the act of charity. Others, and it's like literally verse after verse after verse. So the meditation, that what let's say, we do, if we speak about it, is an act that is aching to on par with that what yagya here stands for. Because we are offering that sensory activity, we're offering that moment in time, we're offering in ourselves into that moment of stillness, you see? So here, going back to the wheel of Vamishvari, which immediately introduces all these impositions, and from there on, this now begins to ripple out and taking form as the entire, let's say, creation, with Vamishvari being that of supreme importance, because that's the most powerful of all the wheels of Shakti. Because this is where Shiva's awareness is contracted. This is the power, you see, the power of Shakti here contracts Shiva's awareness and rips him off of all this omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, and the qualities that otherwise beyond time and space. And from there on, it's unstoppable now. So from the wheel of Vamishvari, right? We go to the wheel of Kekari. The wheel of Kekari. At the wheel of Kekari is where, let's say, in relation to what we spoke yesterday when we talked about the psychic, remember when we talked about this? Yeah, remember? At the level of Kekari, it's this level. It's this level. It's what will connect all other levels of progressive expansion, whilst at the very same time crystallizing everything into whatever category it meant to be when that is completed. So Kekari here is move from that level, what is represented at the level of Vamishvari, towards subjectivity. You see? This is the first move. This is the experience of subjectivity. This is not subjectivity we speak of in terms of feeling oneself as an individual. It is still supreme level of subjectivity. It is born at that level of expansion, where that subjectivity indeed carries the seeds of what will make each and every one of us feel as a unique unit of consciousness. Doesn't matter whether he or she feels ignorant or doesn't care if that such categories exist, or feels liberated, enlightened. It is still accompanied by that sense of, I know that I'm here and you are there. And you are there. And I have no, absolutely, it's very, very clearly marked here by that ahamkaric field of my identity as this body, recognizing your identity there. The seeds of that is already at the level of Kekari. You see? So this it will progress further. And of course, it's, for some of you, it will be possibly beginning of the beautiful journey of your own investigation. Because, let me just add this. As far as the essence of yogic practices, from the point of view what is in Kashmir Shaivism is given that the most important achievement is considered to be direct communion and access to these wheels of Shakti. Familiarity with and access to the wheels of Shakti is what makes one master in one's body, which is then, by then, has full identity with Shiva. See? So even with that full identity with Shiva, with awareness, yogis of Kashmir Shaivism had this as a clear understanding that in order to truly savor this, access to these wheels of energy is a prerequisite. And it has always been considered as the dim secret. You could not find this in any other schools of Indian philosophy. It doesn't exist. It's unique to Kashmir Shaivism.